introduce Chris, and then we'll get started. So Dr. Chris Kodani is an associate professor of biology at Clayton State University. He was first certified with our program as an adoptive stream certified volunteer in the spring of 2002. So definitely a veteran. We're glad to have you. And since then, he's published 2 peer-reviewed scientific papers on volunteer stream monitoring. And he's been on our Confluence committee for several years, so he's been a big part of making this conference a success, which we appreciate. He's also an avid fisherman and enjoys spending time on the water with his wife and 2 sons. Awesome. Okay, well, I'm gonna share my screen here and get us started with our video for today.
Hi, my name is Dr. Chris Kodani from Clayton State University, and I'd like to welcome you to Confluence, and I'd also like to welcome you to my session on Mapping Your Watershed Online. This is part 1, which is the basics of our workshop today, and part 1 covers what is a GIS, and I'm going to show you some examples of what a GIS can do. All right, so here are your learning objectives for today. First off, what is a watershed? Just a quick review. Secondly, what is a GIS? And thirdly, how can we use Stroud's Watershed Wiki? Watershed Wiki is a very good example of what a GIS can do, and it's very easy to use. So I'm assuming we're all beginners today, so it's a very good tool for beginners to use. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Okay, quick review. Since you're watching this video, I know you already know what a watershed is, but just to recap, it is an uphill area that provides water to a point on a stream. And here we see our famous illustration you've seen many, many times in the past. Here is a watershed, and any rain that falls on the land that's within the watershed will provide water to that stream right there. Remember, this is defined by high points, like peaks and ridges. Typically, we all know that water flows downhill, so high points are naturally going to be used to define the watershed. Watersheds can be large or small, and this is one of the things that sometimes people have a hard time with this concept, because the watershed really depends on where you define it from. It always starts with the river or the creek that you're interested in, but where your sampling point is, that's critical in terms of determining where your watershed is. So you can have big watersheds, small watersheds, and you can have watersheds of all different sizes, and they could be nested within each other. That's a really important concept, to get across, especially that you could have, many different watersheds, within a bigger watershed. Another important concept: forests. Forests are absolutely great for watersheds. They do fantastic things, in terms of keeping the water nice and cool, nice and clean. These are all things that we like as stream monitors, of course. So look for forests if you want to monitor a high-quality watershed. On the other hand, it's just as important to monitor some of the more urban watersheds too. So urban watersheds come with something called impervious surfaces. And these are any hard surfaces, like roofs, for instance. Sidewalks can be impervious surfaces as well. Pavement can be impervious surfaces as well. And these tend to affect the water quality in a bad way within your watershed. And of course, anything that happens within your watershed, for instance, if you've got different industries, if you've got even a sewage treatment plant, that can sometimes affect the quality of your watershed and the quality of the water in the stream. And of course, the macroinvertebrates that live there as well. Okay, so now we're moving on to what is a GIS. GIS stands for Geographical Information System. And this pretty much always involves a computer. And I like to tell my students that keep GIS separate from GPS in your mind. GPS is geographical. GPS is, oh my goodness, what is that? The GPS is a geographical positioning system. So a GIS is something that you're probably going to look at with your computer. A GPS is something that you're going to put on the front windshield of your car, or you might have a handheld unit that you go hiking with. Esri. Let's talk a little bit about Esri. We'll talk about them maybe a little bit more in part 2. But Esri is the company that is in charge of, they make GIS software, and they've done a lot to further the science of, well, where things are, of course. And then lastly, the working definition that we're going to use today is that GIS is a way to combine maps and data to do analysis and create new maps and present that information in new and different ways. And let's go ahead and show you by example. So the example that we're going to use to begin with will be from Stroud Water Research Center. And they've got a fantastic website called Watershed. And we're going to go in there and we'll work on examples of all of that in just a minute. But this works incredibly well for mapping larger watersheds. And it's a very, I would say it's a very complete kind of resource, especially so good for beginners for a couple of reasons. Number one, it fits our budget. It's free to the public. In the past, they've asked that you log in with an ID, and I think they were just keeping track of who was using the resource. They just wanted your email, you know, something like that. And it's also very, very easy to use. And you'll see, I'll show you in just a few clicks, you can produce a rather impressive map and get some rather impressive information out of it as well. So let's move on. And let's show you an example. Of course, Unicoi State Park. This is where we all love to go for things like Confluence when we can get up there. And in this particular case, you can see we've defined a watershed. The Watershed Wiki actually does this automatically. All you have to do is click on one particular point, and it will actually define all the areas that are upstream of your sampling point, and then it'll find all those areas that are around that stream that are very high. And that's so nice because we just click a button and you get an instant watershed. But in addition to that, it also provides you with some very, very interesting information. So for instance, here you can see on the land tab, it'll tell you about some land cover in various different categories. And as you can see, oh my goodness, of course, Unicoi State Park is mostly forest, and it'll even break it down by there's some evergreen forest, there's some mixed forest, most of it is deciduous, there's a little bit of developed space. You do have some areas, and I'm assuming all these red areas are probably by the lodge themselves. There are some areas of high intensity. There's various things like roads, et cetera, there. So you can get a very nice watershed map, just like this. And just to show you, sometimes it's really interesting to do a comparison, and especially you can see, well, maybe if you're doing some kind of science project, it might be nice to compare to some place that maybe has a different kind of watershed. So to look for a different kind of watershed, you really don't have to go too far out of Atlanta. Hartsfield-Jackson, the airport, of course, provides a very different kind of watershed. So here it is in the Wiki Watershed, and you can see, oh my goodness, there's an awful lot of this red color as opposed to the green color that we saw in our last map. And you can see, oh yes, it's got a lot of very high intensity development right there. And you can even see, oh, okay, here's the airport, and you can even see the individual runways on the map and all the surrounding areas. And I believe the sampling point was right over here for this particular watershed. So sometimes it's interesting to do some comparison, and you can even do something like download the data from that. So not only does it give it to you graphically, but if you want, you can even download the analysis. And this is very, very powerful. And if you take a look, it gives you all the percentages right there, in square kilometers. It even gives you the national land cover code for each one of these if you're interested in that. But it even tells you just in plain English, oh, well, code 11, that's open water, et cetera, and you've got a whole breakdown. So once you've got that downloaded, you could say do something like put it on a graph, right? Because that's what helps us with science. And in this case, you can see we've got the Hartsfield-Jackson in the orange, and you can graphically compare the two different watersheds and see, oh yeah, well, there's some differences between the two. Here's Unicoi in the blue, and you can have your software just go ahead and bar graph it all out. I just happen to be using Microsoft Excel, but you use whatever works for you. There's various kinds of software, free, available on the internet if you like. And so you can get this very nice analysis that if you're monitoring a couple different watersheds, you might be seeing some differences in your results, maybe in your water chemistry. They may be different between two watersheds. Of course, the macroinvertebrate community might differ as well, depending on what kind water you have, which depends on what kind of watershed you've got as well. So, I think it's very helpful and useful for people to get this kind of analysis, because it at least gives you some ideas of what you might want to look for. And of course, the maps are very, very useful for that. There are some limitations to this. This particular tool does not work well for very tiny watersheds. Most of the time in Georgia Adopt a Stream, we like to monitor wadable streams that are maybe first order or second order. So this particular tool doesn't get into some of the very small watersheds, and I'll show you what I mean by that. And then the second thing is, and this is more for these small watersheds, it does produce sort of like a rough sawtooth edge to it, and I'll show you what we mean by that. But at this time, we'll go ahead and do a watershed. We'll go into Wiki Watershed right there. Okay, so here we are in Wiki Watershed, and we will go ahead and scroll down and come to Model My Watershed, and we'll launch the app right there. And the first thing you see is, of course, a map of the United States. And we'll go ahead and scroll down here to get started. And here it says, select an area. Well, we're really interested in delineating watersheds, so we'll go ahead and choose this. Now, right here, we've got a couple of different layers that we can choose from. We've got the continental US medium resolution layer, and then we've got the Delaware high resolution layer. Unfortunately, we don't have the high resolution available for us as the general public, but we do have the continental US medium, so we'll go ahead and click on that. And it says, click a point to delineate a watershed. So over here, let me show you, I'll move my picture over here. And one of the nice things is you can search for a particular area very quickly. And we'll search for Unicoi State Park since we're familiar with that. And oh, okay, here we've got Unicoi State Park. And you can see this must be the lodge right here where they've got the pin dropped. And you can see now I've got a pin that I can drop on a watershed. And here, this is Smith Creek, which is within the state park. And we can drop a pin right here, and it will delineate the watershed automatically for us. So I'm going to go ahead and click. And then we can see it's already thinking, wow, that was nice and fast. And you can see here we go. Our watershed is completely delineated at this time. And of course, it'll tell you a little bit about the stream network itself. Probably we're more interested in the land cover. And then, of course, this is that same kind of analysis that we saw before. Now, if we wanted to do a smaller portion of the watershed, let me show you what happens. So we can change area. And okay, so let me come back to Unicoi State Park. All right, so if we wanted to move up to some of these smaller areas, now I know there's a little tiny creek right in here. Now, here's Unicoi Lake, and the dam is right here. Here's where the lodge is, and I know there's a little creek right here because I've been there. And we could delineate a watershed. This continental, okay, and it's saying click a point. So if we wanted to click and delineate, this might do it. Okay, all right. So we saw there was a little bit of a problem. It wasn't able to get way up into there, so there was a little bit of an offset. That's not very bad at all. And you can see there must be a creek that goes all the way, up here. And in fact, if you choose a different area, right? We'll change area again, delineate the watershed, and try to find a very small creek. Let's say this one right here, it's a steep creek. Okay, we'll take steep creek and see how far up we can delineate. And it might do it, but then again, it might have some other problems too. Oh, okay, all right. So we weren't able to delineate Steep Creek as well as we'd like. Steep Creek was up here. It chose to delineate from Smith Creek, which is a very different watershed. So this is just something that you need to be aware of. If you're doing a very, very small creek, it might not do exactly the creek that you want. So in this case, maybe this particular tool is not as good. We can see, between the purple and the blue here, where it chose to automatically delineate. It's not as good for smaller areas, but that's okay. If you're monitoring a bigger creek, it might be able to do the bigger watershed just fine. So let's go back to our presentation. So basically, that's it. That's the end of part one. So we were able to learn what a GIS is. We saw Stroud's Wiki Watershed, and I'd like to invite you to come and see part two, when we're going to cover the basics of ArcGIS Online. All right, thank you so much, as always, and like I said before, welcome to Confluence, and have a great day. Welcome back to our workshop, Mapping Your Watershed Online. I'm Dr. Chris Kodani, your host, and this is part two of our workshop. We just had part one, which went over a little bit on what GIS is, and now we're going to start our exercise on actually getting into ArcGIS Online and hopefully delineating a watershed. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Here's our learning objectives for part two. First, I want you all to sign up for a free public account with ArcGIS Online. Secondly, you should be able to join our ArcGIS group. It's kind of like our own special mapping club. We're going to make a map, we're going to share the map, we're going to add some features to it, and then lastly, we will draw a watershed. And over here on the right-hand side of your screen, just below my picture, you should be able to see these are the instructions that I'm going to include with the conference proceedings. So that way you can follow along in that Word document as well. So let's talk a little bit about ArcGIS Online first. I think that ArcGIS Online is particularly good for citizen scientists, such as Georgia Adopt a Stream monitoring volunteers, just like we are. And there's some very good reasons for this. First off, it is much easier to use than a research grade GIS. And I'm lucky enough that I've seen some of the evolution of GIS software. I will be totally honest with you. It's better than it's ever been right now. And yeah, there's no good old days in terms of GIS. Right now is the good old days. In the future, that's going to be good old days. But yeah, back in the good old days, it wasn't that good. It was difficult. It's much easier to use now. So that's very nice. Second thing, it's more flexible than other things like, for instance, Google Maps. Don't get me wrong, Google Maps, you can delineate a watershed on Google Maps just fine. Google Maps is kind of nice, it's easy to use. But with ArcGIS Online, you've got several base maps that are available to use, and some of those are actually better if you're a citizen scientist. Another thing, public accounts are free, and I'm emphasizing that public accounts are free. Remember, we're volunteers. I'm working off the assumption that we have no budgets, right? So certainly free fits our budget. And then lastly, it is social. So this is something that's kind of new to GIS, and I think this is going to be the direction that it goes in the future. You're going to have a more social presence to GIS. So let's go ahead and next screen. Mapping is now social, right? So what are we going to do with it? Well, what I am hoping is that in the future, Georgia Adopt a Stream volunteers might be interested in sharing their maps with others. So you can share your map with all members of our group. So we've got a mapping group in ArcGIS Online, and hopefully we'll be sharing maps with each other. You can also share with all the people on ArcGIS Online, and that's one of the features. Somebody might be searching for all maps of Georgia, and they could come across your map, for instance. And you can also share with anybody that you want to give a link to. So if there's somebody, for instance, if you are a leader of a watershed or a monitoring group and you want everybody in the group to get an email with that link, hey, you can do that with this. And it's actually kind of fun. Okay, so why share in the first place? Well, it's my hope that people would sort of link up by watershed address, right? We've got our home address. Well, we've also got watersheds. So I think it makes a lot of sense, especially with a group like ours, since we're all members of Georgia Adopt a Stream. It might be kind of nice to share a neighborhood map, right? Other thing, people can edit the map. So this is a feature that I'm hoping that we'll use in this workshop today. So you can enter some new data, potentially. You can add new features, and then you could share that back to the group too. So it's kind of nice that way. And there's always the possibility that you will need, or maybe even want, a deeper analysis than what you can get from ArcGIS Online. Well, the advantage of using ArcGIS Online is that if you've got friends that use ArcGIS Desktop, that is much more powerful. They've upgraded it now to ArcGIS Pro. So, for instance, if you know me, well, I've got ArcGIS Pro. I've also got another ArcGIS Online account that's a premium account. And both of those have some really nice features that maybe if you need some help, send me an email and maybe I can help you out with some of those nicer features that are available in the more expensive options. Okay, so step one, how do we get a public account? So you will go to this address right here. Here's what it looks like in your instructions. I even linked it up in your instructions so you've got that available to you. And let me emphasize once again, this stuff should be totally free. Don't give them anything like your credit card. We're working off of the assumption that we have no budget, right? So what you're gonna look for is the public account. And this is exactly what you're gonna be looking for when you want to create that account. So let me take you real quick to that website and I'll show you exactly what that looks like. So when you create an account here, you can see create an ArcGIS account. Now right up front, they give you some nice bait. Don't take this one. This is a free trial, but I want to be very clear about this. This one, I believe, gives you access to a 21-day account that gives you all the capabilities. That's really, really nice. But like many things, hey, they give you the first free and then they get you hooked later on. Remember, we're working off the assumption that we've got no budget to work with. So what I want you to do is scroll down to the create a public account and click on this. That's a public account right here, and then you'll be able to create one. And remember, those public accounts, that's where I created our GIS group for Georgia Adopt a Stream. So that's where all your buddies are going to be, right? Down in the low budget section. So come and join us, right? So let's back to our PowerPoint here. And then after you get into there, you're going to ultimately want to join our group. So you're going to search for our group, and you can see there's a search box here. You will put in Confluence 2020 Map Group, and make sure on the right-hand side of that little search box, you click groups. The reason why is there's some content and there's groups. Well, remember, you want to join a group, so make sure you click on the groups right there. And then eventually what you're going to be looking for is something like this. I stole our famous logo right out of the training manuals right there. And you can see, oh, that's the Confluence 2020 Map Group right there. So let me take you through the exercise of actually logging in. And once you actually get your login, you'll be able to see something kind of like this. So you'll sign in. And I'm going to go to my free public account. And then I've got some groups that I've got set up. Well, the group that you're looking for is this Confluence 2020 Map Group. And you'll be able to search for that. So you can see there's a little search box right up here. There's a search box over here, and we can search for 2020 map. And make sure you do this and you click on the little group box, and then that's the one that you go into. Now, you're not immediately a member. What'll happen is you have to request membership. So go ahead and when you see that, go ahead and click on it, and it'll ask you if you want to ask to be a member. Or alternatively, I guess you could send me an email. Let me know through the, or even through the chat. You can let me know. To invite you, I can invite you as well. And currently, we've got no membership requests, but of course, we hope that number is going to change very, very soon. So now we've logged in, and now we'll be able to move on to our actual exercise. Okay, so here we are in our Confluence map group right here. You've been accepted as part of the club. And if we scroll down here, we've got our Unicoi starting map. And we're going to go ahead and use this for some delineation practice. So go ahead and open up this map right here. and go ahead and follow along in our instructions that we've got on the right-hand side of the screen. And the first thing that we want you to do is save your map. We'll go ahead and open this up in the map viewer. And this is the default, what a map looks like in ArcGIS Online. So we'll go ahead and click on save, and we'll save as, and we want you to save it as something different than Unicoi starting map. So we've got a little name here for you. You put your name, Confluence map. Okay, so whatever your name is, you put that, and then Confluence map right after that, and you'll save it. And the reason why we do this is we want to make a map that is entirely yours, right? You want to make it your own. So this will get you the correct location right here, and you'll be able to add to it. So one of the things that we want to do is label where the state park is. So as a matter of fact, it's not marked on this particular map, but there is the lodge right here. And if we zoom in, you can even see, oh, okay, there's the state park lodge. And we want to add a layer to our map where we can label some things. So first thing we will do is we will click on this add icon right here, and we're going to add something called map notes. Okay, so the map notes dialog will come up, and it looks something like this. Now, just leaving it called map notes is okay, but maybe we want to customize it and add something a little bit more descriptive. Anytime you make a map, anytime that you spend a little bit customizing your map and giving it a little bit more significance, that's going to help not only you, but also anybody who looks at this map to be able to understand what's going on with it a little bit better. So we're going to just call this Unicoi map notes, just to personalize it a little bit. So I'll go ahead and click create. Now I want you to watch what will happen on the left side of the screen. And there we go. We've added the Unicoi map notes here, and a bunch of nice things come up on the left side. We can see there's a whole menu full of really nice tools that are going to help us out. Okay, so let me scroll down. And it should look very much like that, and it does. So we're happy with that. Okay, so then the next thing we're going to do, we are going to add a label for this State Park Lodge. So in this case, we'll do a push pin, and we can scroll over to the lodge, and we can add a note, just like that. Okay, so let me get to where you can see this, and we can even put a label on this little note. We'll call it Unicoi State Park Lodge. And we can even change the symbol. Green will not show up very well on this map, so for this particular landmark, we're going to use a red dot. And the nice thing about ArcGIS is it lets you customize just about everything with any of the marks that you leave on the map. You can customize your color, you can customize size, shape, everything. It's really fantastic. You can even use different pictures. And we'll go ahead and close. Okay, so from this point forward, anytime we scroll over that, we can click and we can get the label very, very nicely like that. So we'll go ahead and close. Now we want to share our map with a group. I'm just going to go ahead and click save real quickly again. And in order to share, you see this link right here. We will share it to everyone in the public and members of our group and our mapping group right there. So, I don't have to share it with everybody, just certain groups. Okay, so we want to share it with our Confluence mapping group. Interestingly, if you want a link to the map, it produces the URL right there. And when we're finished with this, make sure you click on Done right here. So at this time, we'd probably like to start mapping out our watershed, right? So one of the things we'll do is we will zoom out a little bit, and we can see, oh, there's the lake at Unicoi right there, and you can see here's Smith Creek You can see it on our photo. You know, there's Smith Creek right there, and Smith Creek goes above the dam and it comes into this area right here. And things are a little bit hard to see with this base layer that we've got. This map that we're seeing, that's actually just the imagery of the area, is called the base map. So one of the things that will help us out with delineating our watershed is changing the base map a little bit to something that we can use. There are topographic maps that are available to us. So we can change to that, and you see, oh, this brings us something that's a little bit clearer and helps us to see the area a little bit more in detail. And you can see here's the north part of Smith Creek, and it goes all the way up. And remember, when I showed you that other website, we were able to delineate something on Smith Creek, you know, no problem, because it is a larger creek. But remember, there was one that I showed you that was off to the side right here. Now, this little creek doesn't even show up on this particular topo map. But there is a little trick that we can do, and once again, the answer is changing the base map. If you scroll all the way down here to the bottom, we've got what are called USA topo maps. And this, if you've ever dealt with a topo map before, this should look a little bit more familiar to you. So if you take a look, you can see, there's Unicoi Lake, right? Here's Smith Creek over here to the right, or the east. And if you look to the west, hey, wait a second, there's a little unnamed creek, that tiny little creek. We're just going to call it Tiny Creek right here. So as a matter of fact, you can see, you can follow it all the way up. And this is something that didn't show on the other topo map. It even crosses this road right here and then goes way, 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 way up here. So this is one of the neat tricks about GIS. You can look at different kinds of maps, and they give you different kinds of information. And you can even change it to, well, even just a plain gray background if you want. And so that's the nice thing about base maps. So we're going to map out this whole watershed here by using all these different nice little tools at our disposal. So once again, well, now that we've changed our base layer, we want to draw the creek that we're interested in. So we've got to put a little star on what we're going to call our sampling point that will define our watershed. So we're going to go back to the Unicoi map notes. We need to make an edit to that layer because we're going to add something new to it. And once again, we'll just go ahead and use our push pin because it's kind of convenient for us. And this right here, where that road crosses that little tiny creek, we're going to go ahead and put a little point right there. And we're going to call that our sampling point for Tiny Creek. Sampling point. And once again, we will change our symbol. Now we want to use something that's appropriate. So we'll go ahead and use some kind of bright blue shape, maybe a, let me see what we've got here. Yeah, we've got a star that's available. I just did Control minus to make things a little bit smaller, and you can go Control plus to make things a little bit bigger. So let's use this bright blue star. That's a nice bright blue color, and it'll stand out on just about any kind of map that we make today. So I'm going to click OK. And I'll close. And look, that's where our bright blue star added. So everywhere from here upstream, we're going to go ahead and call our tiny little creek. Now, if you've never had to read a topo map, I would definitely suggest go to this cbolar.org website, and they've got a nice tutorial on how to read a topo map. And it's a search and rescue website in New Mexico, and they just happen to have some really nice examples of different features on the topo map and how to read them. So yeah, I greatly recommend that. Yeah. So one of the things we want to do is we want to draw everything upstream from our point so we can see where the creek is and where the water is coming from. As a matter of fact, and it's kind of interesting, I can even see some things on this map that might be telling me I think that the creek network is actually a little bit bigger than what's shown here. All right, So let's take a look at the screen right now. And what I've done is I've zoomed out to the full length of our creek right here, our tiny creek. And you can see it goes all the way up there. So we want to put a freehand line into our map to help us see where the creek is. So we're just going to go ahead and trace the creek like this using the freehand tool. And we can get that whole creek right in there. And once again, we'll change the symbol. We'll go ahead and use that same kind of blue. And let's go ahead and make that creek nice and thick so that way we can see it. So maybe we'll go with, oh, I don't know, maybe a 4. We could go even, let's do one better than that, right? Doesn't cost us anything to make it thicker, right? So go ahead and do that. And I will click OK down in the bottom right there. And that's going to help us out a lot. Well, as I had mentioned before, I suspect that there's a lot more going on to this creek than is shown on this map here. And one of the areas where I think we can see that is probably down right around here. I think we've got some things going on with maybe even some smaller tributaries that may even be creeks that aren't there all the time. Oops, yeah, let me get away from our tool there, right? So I can zoom in a little bit. And anytime you've got a V like this, there's a good chance that there's maybe a creek there or some kind of valley or some kind of wash. And the point of the V's will always point towards uphill. So if you're following a creek upstream, you want to look at the lines on the topo map, the isoclines as they're called, and follow them uphill. So if you take a look right here, I think there may be something going on. There may be a tiny little creek right here, maybe one that's dry most of the time, and maybe it only appears when it's wet. It's hard for us to tell, but I think that could help us out. So we can even add maybe a slightly different line right here, and we'll go ahead and say, okay, that's probably a tributary, right? We can change our symbol, and we could use that same bright blue, but maybe we'll leave that as a smaller line just to help us out like that. And we'll go ahead and close. And if we take a look a little bit more, oh, there might be something going on right there. Maybe a little creek that may be dry most of the time. You can tell, oh, it's probably a wash down here, something. And this is just helping us to delineate our watershed a little bit more. Same kind of blue color. And I'm taking a look, and I think we've just about got everything. Oh, maybe something a little bit going on here. Maybe. And this will just help us to delineate once again. We're not really sure what's going on the ground, but this is why ground truthing would be important. And of course, your own neighborhood watershed you'd be fairly familiar with. So you might have, you probably even have an idea in your mind what that watershed looks like in your head before you even go to really map it out. So I'm just looking and yeah, this might be a dry wash. I don't think it's got water in it most of the time. And you can see what's going on with that. Okay, so, and you can see, yeah, maybe even a little bit, something going on here. There's probably some tiny little branches that, most of the time don't even have water, but they're still in our watershed. So that's why they're important. Another thing that we want to keep paying attention to is the high points in our watershed. The high points tell us where the water is where the boundaries of the watershed is. So we can see we've got a little high point up here, and maybe we'll add some kind of symbol right there, and we'll decide exactly what that's going to be. But we can tell, oh, that's kind of close to our watershed, so that might be an important point. And we can tell the water probably comes down this way. Okay, so this might be an important point right about here. Oh, I don't know what kind of shape we will use for this. Probably still bright blue to stay consistent. And maybe we'll go with, oh, I don't know, maybe just maybe a diamond or something. Okay, we can tell, looking around where the other high points are. This is probably also going to be an important high point. You can see this is a ridge. Anytime you get the U shapes like this, that's probably the top of a ridge. So we'll mark that as an important point as well too. We'll put our diamond symbol there. Okay, and once again, looking around. Oh, we can tell water is going to come down here. This looks like it is a ridge of some kind, so that might be important. And you can see the boundaries to the watershed are almost like kind of like an oven mitt. If this is a hand, right, where your fingers right here, this is kind of an oven mitt that we're drawing around all those fingers. So we'll go ahead and put in a little push pin right here, probably on that ridge right there. Again, looking around. Well, we've probably got a high point up here that might be important. We can see there's definitely a ridge. Oh, hold on, wait a minute. We've got, okay, so yeah, probably up here we're going to have to put some kind of high points to help us delineate. Okay, other ones that kind of jump out at me immediately. This and this, these are probably points that we're going to have to. Oh, and this is a good point to point out something. With some of the base maps, if you go in and zoom in too far, the base map will actually kind of disappear because they're of a certain resolution, and if you go too far in on your zooming, it doesn't have that much resolution, so they take it out for you. And probably this peak is going to be important. And this one too. Okay, and looking around here. Oh, okay, maybe this point. And this is all part of the fun, right? You're trying to figure out, oh, okay, we've got, okay, and this is some kind of ridge, so I think this ridge is going to be important. Looking around. Okay, we know this is going to be included, so there's probably a high point right over here. Now, an important thing is to notice, we've got Steep Creek over here, and this goes into Smith Creek. So this is definitely not in our watershed. And in fact, if you wanted to, you could even put a red line here to tell you, hey, that's the watershed. I think probably a defining point will be right here. Looks like we've got a point right here. This is going to be a ridge. Anytime you get these U shapes, that will be a ridge. Anytime you get a circle, that could be a high point, a peak. Probably a peak right there and a peak right there. And once again, this is just to help us delineate where our watershed will be. Something like that. Okay, so taking a look, zoomed out, we can tell, oh, okay, it's going to be something, sort of like this. And, in a sense, we can kind of connect the dots, but we're also aware of where ridges are. The other thing I'd like to do is just take a closer look over at this right here. So we've got this coming in, and it gets kind of flat up here, you can see. So this is going to, oh, this is a little hint right here. Here's some other creek. So definitely we're not going to want to include any of this. So this is going to be part of that ridge that's going to help us define. Got a ridge right here. That might be important. Got a high point right here. So, yeah, I think probably it's going to be here, and then I can see here's a U shape right here. So there's probably going to be a little bit that we have to do. right here down this ridge, and probably wanted to include this in our watershed as well. So something like that. Okay, so we'll keep that in mind while we're drawing our watershed. Okay, as a matter of fact, one of the things we can do is we can add another map note, and maybe we'll add this for our watershed as a new layer on top of what we're doing. And we'll call this tiny. Okay, and now it should be, Tiny Creek Watershed right there. So you notice we can click off our Unicoi map notes, and then we can, there's nothing in our Tiny Creek Watershed right now. But what we can do is we can edit, and we can see Tiny Creek Watershed. And what we'll do is we can do this by, I think we'll do, okay, now that we've got our map notes, both for Unicoi map notes, those were the ones with all the points and the creek right there, like you can see. We've added our Tiny Creek Watershed map notes as well. Let's go ahead and delineate our actual watershed. And when you come to edit, here's an important point. You notice it says Tiny Creek Watershed points right here. Well, if we want to edit that layer, these are the tools that we use, but notice we've got a scroll bar here on the side, Tiny Creek Watershed areas, and then it goes back to Unicoi map notes, right? So make sure you select the correct tools for the correct layer that you want. We want to add an area to our Tiny Creek Watershed layer. So we'll go ahead and click and just kind of go through and connect our dots. And we will also click on the original star. Now, as we do this, make sure you double click so it finishes and completes our polygon, like so. Now, once again, it's giving us the option to change our symbology at this time. And one of the nice things that we can do is, of course, we can pick an appropriate color. Maybe for the fill, we would like maybe a darker blue like this. For the outline, we might like a slightly lighter blue like this. And we can also change the transparency. Now, within the polygon, we want to be able to see through that because we've got details on our map that we don't want to cover up. So if you see it right here, it defaulted towards 50% transparency. And let's take a look at that and see what it looks like. And that's not bad. We can actually see right through that, just fine. But if we'd like it to be more transparent, we can adjust that to say 75 or so. Okay. And you can see through it a lot better. You can still see a little bit of shading there. On the other hand, if you wanted to go 0% transparency, that would make our object completely opaque, and that's all adjustable. See, you can see it almost looks a little bit like a lake, and that's not what we want. So we'll probably change it back to, that default of 50% actually looked like it was pretty good for that one. And we can close out, and now we've got our different layers that we've got. So we've got our watershed as a layer. We've got our little creek and all the high points that were defined in our lodge that we can click on and off like that. And that's kind of a neat thing, as well. That's available for us. So we can actually do this. And then, of course, if we need to change the base map at any time, say if we wanted to go to the imagery, we could change that back to that. One of the neat things is that we can change to different kinds of maps. So one of the favorites that I like to use is, say, the dark gray canvas. And this is where you can get into customizing all the different colors. This one really takes out a lot of the detail for the map. Say if the map was, to your eye, maybe getting a little bit muddled and had a little bit too much detail on it. Sometimes taking away that detail is nice. The dark gray background is fantastic for changing that up. Or say if you want something with a little bit different feel to it, you could go to a light gray canvas and it's going to produce something like that. Say if you wanted to see some of the, well, for instance, in this case, roads, you've got that available to you. So really, that's pretty much it, for delineating our watershed. I certainly hope that you've enjoyed this. I have, and look, if you ever need help delineating your watershed, I'm available. You know, I want you to know that I enjoy doing this kind of thing. And keep in mind, remember, there's two kinds of ArcGIS Online accounts. There's the free account that everybody can have, and then there's the premium account. Now remember, they offer the 21-day free trial. Well, you might get whatever mapping you need done in 21 days, you know, on that nice account, but keep in mind, I do have, well, a premium account, and that's got some nice features that are available in ArcGIS. For instance, all this with the, you know, putting the high points on and delineating the watershed, that's a good exercise for us to do, and it's good to know how to do that, but they actually have a feature where ArcGIS Online can do that for you automatically, and there's an analysis button right about here on the screen that they, of course, don't put on the free account, but on the premium account, they've got that included for us. But you know, it costs money to have that. You know, so if you need help with that, I'm certainly, you know, willing to help you out with that. So once again, thank you so much for watching my presentation. You know, I really appreciate that, and enjoy the rest of Confluence.
Hello and welcome back, everyone. Hi. All right, let's see if we can get, there's Chris. Awesome, hello. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for that. That was so helpful and really relevant to kind of what we're working on and things that we're doing in the state office too. I know you kind of got us kickstarted with a lot of Esri things a couple of months ago, and we really appreciate it. And so this was a great kind of refresher and getting things on our mind. So thank you.
Hey, not a problem. You know, like I said in the video, I enjoy doing this kind of stuff, and you know, it's really been a huge pleasure, you know, to be part of AdoptaStream for I don't know, about 18 years or something. Yeah, something like that. You know, it was shortly after I came to Georgia that you know, I started up with it. You know, and I knew Harold before he even had a beard. So,
oh wow, that's real deal.
yeah. You know, I think neither of us had kids either. You know, so.
Well, thank you. I don't think we had questions yet in the Q&A. So participants, if you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the Q&A. But I think we all know Chris is very good at this kind of thing, and he would be more than happy to help you at any time if you ever needed assistance. So we appreciate that too.
It's definitely not a problem.
Awesome.
You know, and in fact, you know, yeah, my hope is, you know, if we end up online next year, you know, maybe we can have a bigger, better map, you know.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'll see what happens, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There was a question from Brenda. Can we get a copy of the handout you're working from? Yes. We have that, and it should be already posted on our website. If you go to our resources and recording page, if it is not there, then I will ensure that it is there following the end of this call, but it should be there. And yeah, it's the exact same document that Chris was working from. So.
Oh, one thing, you know, to follow up on that, you know, yeah, there's my handout, and okay, you know, that'll kind of get your feet wet. But the way I learned about ArcGIS was once I got that public account, you know, they want your email, they want to know, well, who's using our software. Well, then all of a sudden there was some emails appearing from Esri about, oh, well, we've got these workshops available. And of course, a lot of them were, well, yeah, pay $500 for a one-day workshop, or, you know, something like that, you know, I wasn't going to do that. But it turns out that they have a lot of free workshops too. And that free workshop, you know, there's several of them. Some of them are actually instructor-led that are in the MOOC. A MOOC is a massive online something course.
that you can basically sign up for an instructor-led course, and they've got discussions in there, and you can get some training that way. Or if you're more independently minded, I've also done some of their free, I guess, tutorials that they offer as well, and those are really excellent. I don't know who does those, but it's pretty clear to me that not only do they put together a good package, but I think they actually beta test those quite a bit before they push them out to the public. So, and there's so much you can learn, even for free. And so far, I haven't paid anything for my GIS training. At some point, I know that's going to change because I'm looking into this, and it's sort of like cooking. Once you make your first grilled cheese sandwich, you're like, okay, well, how do we make a better grilled cheese? How do we move up? I want to make a beef bourguignon one day. You start seeing things, and I'm kind of at that point now where I'm like, oh, man, maybe I'll have to go to San Diego for their conference, or maybe the Redlands, California, or occasionally they even do some workshops on the East Coast too. So
yeah, they do have some great resources like you're saying online. But really, any excuse to go to Redlands, I mean, hey, that works. Awesome.
Yeah, it's they just it's so funny because we're having our very first Confluence Online. Well, they just had every year they put on a conference, and it's always in San Diego. Well, couldn't do that this year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they had their Esri conference online, and I have never been to their conference before. So for me, oddly enough, the COVID ended up creating a nice opportunity because I didn't have to travel. So being on no budget, right? The price certainly fit. So it was kind of a nice thing, and I was very, very impressed by the quality of the training, that they put on for free. So, they want people to use this stuff, and it's lots of fun. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Chris. And I think that, if people have any questions, Barbara's saying that she had to go to the conference and said that it was great, the Esri conference, and Jen and I went as well, and it was very insightful. So, but if y'all have any other questions for Chris, you can put them in the Q&A, but really, you can contact us or Chris following this presentation, and any of us would be happy to help y'all. So we're just gonna go ahead and say thank you guys. Thanks again to Chris, and see if there are any final questions. We do want to let you guys know that if you haven't already, you can join our Confluence 2020 group on Facebook. That's where we're going to be posting some updates, and we really want you guys to be able to use that for networking and getting in touch with your fellow conference attendees. We also have just general pages on Facebook and Instagram. Feel free to go and like those, or also the updates posted there. We do have, this is the first of many sessions for the month, so feel free to go ahead and check out all the other ones that we have available, register, and get excited. Invite your friends and your friends' friends. So, and then again, just kind of reiterating, we will have that resources and recordings page. So if there's anything that you really want to attend but you're unavailable, those will be available on our website.
Yes, and as always, we have a silent auction for Confluence. So this year, our silent auction is posted online. I included a link to it in the chat, but you can also access it through our website. And at the end of this webinar, you will be directed to a brief 3-minute survey. We ask you if you wouldn't mind completing it and letting us know, how we can improve Confluence and our sessions going forward. We would really appreciate that. And if you have any questions for Adopt a Stream or interested in getting involved with the program, always, you can send us an email, and I included that in the chat as well. So if that's it, then thank you, everyone. and hope you have a good evening. Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you all. It's awesome.
Thank you. And we'll see you guys later.